Playing around hand traps isn't nearly as easy as it used to be. In the past, you could jam 3 Called by the Graves and get away with blanking an Ash Blossom here and there. But now with Konami limiting certain cards and releasing certain cards, now it's not as easy as jamming 3 of a card, not unless you're rich. And because of Crossout Designator costing so much money, playing around hand traps effectively has never been more important. My plan for this video is to show you how to play around the most prevalent hand traps and show you how to deal with the ones that will make your life the most difficult as a virtual world player. Now, Lulu is probably your best virtual world, and I say probably like that's up for debate. No, Lulu is absolutely your best virtual world, but it is important to play around cards like Gamma and Ash Blossom, where saving the Lulu for last and giving them virtually nothing to deal with is for the best. You know, you resolve everything first. You go Kowloon, you give them an Ash. If they Ash this, like I said in previous videos, they're greedy. But it's something that works sometimes, you know. You give them a name, you show them like GG, you GG target Chuche dump. You know, there's a name. If they don't Ash you here, you Qinglong, you search, you discard. Even go so far as to use Desires, banish 10, draw 2 Desires for all I care. Do it. Don't let them Ash Blossom your Lulu, because if they read you're on Lulu, and they read that you have it in the hand, they will always save the Ash Blossom. If they're a good player, they'll probably save it anyway, but giving them anything to use it on instead is for the best, you know. Gamma or Ash Blossom in this case. Gamma is only monster effects, Ash Blossom can hit cards like this, but, you know, if they have Ash or Gamma, they're going to save it for the Lulu if they know what they're doing. Don't let them save it for the Lulu. Effect Veiler and Infinite Impermanence are very weird against Virtual World. I think they're amazing against some of the better decks in this format, but I would generously call Virtual World the third best. So people are going to have these in their lists and not really be able to do anything about it. The main choke point, I want to say, where these might come up is against Zolkin. But if you read that they're on Infinite Impermanence or Effect Veiler, making a Synchro before Zolkin guarantees that they can't target it. Like, say I have a Stardust Charge Warrior, draw a card, and then I use 2 more monsters on my side of the field to make Zolkin. I'll set a card, trigger Zolkin. While I control a Synchro, Zolkin cannot be targeted by battle or by card effects. It's a very good form of not being affected by things, you know? There are still hand traps that don't target, there are still things that kind of hit it, but going first, Imperm and Effect Veiler just don't hurt Zolkin. It's a very, very, very easy tell when it comes to people that aren't necessarily as versed in the matchup, when they ask you how these cards resolve. All Virtual World monsters, save for Nyan Nyan, because it's just one of the weird ones, resolve in the hand. They do everything they have to all the way in the hand. Everything else, nothing. Nothing happens on field. If they ask you about that, like say you resolve Lulu targeting Chuche, you're going to dump, special, and then search. They'll ask you if that's a separate part of the effect. If they do that, they are sitting on a Effect Veiler. They are absolutely sitting on some of these forms of negation. And if they do that, and you know that, you can absolutely do something about it. You can just, you tell them how it works, first of all, because, you know, there are always going to be people that don't know this deck, and that's fine. You know, it's weird. These effects are all bizarre. But after that, you have that slight knowledge, just knowing that, hey, they asked this because they have a form of negation, and I should be playing around it. It's one of those little in-game things that just... It's the slightest bit of information knowing that, hey, one of their cards in hand probably doesn't work right now. I should continue to make it not work so that they have a worse chance later on. With a monster like Niburu, it's pretty easy to just say, make a monster negate before 5. The problem is, not every hand can do that. It's very, very weird. Some hands you're not always going to be able to make some of your best monster disruptions, like Gossip Shadow and Ultimaya Zolkin, before 5. You know, if this is your 5th summon, you're sitting pretty. Usually you have something to target if you have monsters in your hand still. But the problem with Zolkin is, if that's your 5th summon, they still have plenty of time to Niburu you before you can set a card. That's just a problem that the deck has. Making this as your 4th summon is the only way you're going to be able to play around Niburu. Game 1, I don't think it's necessarily a a promise that they're going to have Niburu. Games 2 and Game 3, though, if they don't main deck Niburu, they pretty much guaranteed will be getting it in their main deck. So playing around it as best as humanly possible is just the way you survive. With Zulkin, you get Crystal Wing, obviously. With Bamboozling Gossip Shadow, it's a little... You can make it a little later into the combo, whereas Zulkin has to be your fourth one. But it's a much weaker form of negation. It just pretty much is useless as a 2600 body afterwards, whereas Crystal Wing gains the attack. It's massive. It's very hard to out for some decks because of the way the battle works with it, with level monsters. Aside from those two, though, it's a little weird. If you know you're not going to be able to make a level 12, you can make Shen Shen and not have to worry about it. Shen Shen is just going to come back next turn. It's not really a problem if your opponent Nibiru's you there. Sure, they don't have a Macrocosmos on their turn, but hopefully you'll have a Chuche for Disruption and whatever else is left in your hand. And if you can make a 12 but you don't have anything to set, you can make Final Sigma. Final Sigma is completely unaffected by all card effects when it's in the extra monster zone, so Nibiru doesn't affect it. It says Tribute, doesn't matter. Nothing. You just got a token and a big ol' Sigma. And finally, not the best way to play around Nibiru, but definitely one of the better follow-up options in the event that none of these can really stick. Just having a Zanwu in the grave. You know, just being able to banish that, pitch a card, and then reborn something, and then continue to go through your plays in the event that you don't have... you haven't wasted all your names at that point. You still end on a pretty good board after all that. And all you need is just a Zanwu midway through your combo before 5, before they can really give you something to deal with. Yeah, I'll just be honest. Lancia is a game ender. It's just so difficult to deal with. This is probably the best hand trap against this deck. Spare for some of the weird ones like Dimension Shifter. But even that you can play through at least a little bit. You can make a live Chuche, I guess, but you're not going to be able to do that through Lancia. The best bet you have is ending on a Shen Shen if your hand is great, a Zulkin and a Crystal Wing if your hand is really great, or a Gossip Shadow if your hand is, you know, kind of mid-tier. You're not going to do a lot. I'm sorry. That's just how it goes. You're going to have to pass on exactly one of these, or you're out of the game post-Lancia. Or just, you know, pray they open 5 Lancias and they're not going to do anything next turn. Grave interaction hand traps are probably some of the better ones in Yu-Gi-Oh! Today. They're just so interactive with the meta, so many things are happening in the graveyard, but the problem is a lot of things happen for cost and a lot of things don't target. Whereas DD Crow would be helpful against something that targets. Things like Lao Lao and GG just don't. Zanwu does, I guess that kind of matters, but if they're DD Crowing whatever you're Zanwuing, you know, let them. They're probably better off saving it for something like a Qinglong. A lot of people don't know, DD Crow can be any card, not just monsters, so absolutely, by all means, get this out of rotation before they can activate it. Whereas cards like Ghost Spell and Haunted Mansion, it can hit all of this, technically. It can hit Lao Lao, it can hit GG, it can hit Zanwu. It can't hit Qinglong because Qinglong banishes for cost. That's another point of contention. I've seen a lot of people try to show me Bell when I banish Qinglong. Lao Lao, probably one of the better ones. It still doesn't target, though, so DD Crow kind of dead. GG, all of this activates immediately. So if you GG effect, it resolves during the end phase. If they don't bail you when you show GG, they cannot bail you at any point prior or afterwards, you know. Zanwu, it targets. It's probably the worst one into these two hand traps, but if they're saving these for Zanwu, you know, let them. With Drytron running around in the meta just going absolutely crazy, I think it's pretty safe to say that Droll Knockbird is a crazy good include into a lot of sideboards. It's just amazing against that deck. It absolutely ends the game. Problem is, it ends Virtual World's game a lot more than you'd think. You know, a lot of people go around saying, oh, Virtual World only searches like twice. Well, what are we going to do about it? Droll Knock doesn't really hurt that. First of all, it searches a lot more than twice. There are so many cards in this deck that say, card go from deck to hand. Second, those are some important searches. You know, banishing something or banishing Qinglong to search something, always going to be good. Lulu, if you're under Droll Knockbird and you're staring at a Lulu in your hand, you are feeling god-awful, you know? Pot of Desires you can set for Zulkin, I guess, but besides that, it's just dead. Tactics, you can get some hand information, but you don't get to draw to. it's so many things go dead under Joel Mockbird. I think the only way you play around it is if you have a Chuche on field, you make Lulu your first search. I know that kind of goes against what I was saying with the Ash Blossom philosophy, but that's it. It's so difficult to say because there's no real way you know what's in your opponent's hand aside from tactics. But I don't know. Search, and if they don't say anything about it, then go ham. But do as much as you can. Try to play around Droll as best as you can. I don't think Desires is the best way to start something lately, unless your hand is just absolutely dead. You're not going to do anything without Desires. But, anything else, anything before Desires, because then they just kill you with the Droll. You're not going to be able to do anything with the hand you're looking at post Desires.